I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on.
Well, now we come to one of the more divisive entries in the series, Alien³ Wait, no, I guess that sounds too terrestrial. Let's just call it Alien³. This movie had a troubled production from the start, and that's not even counting the fact that it went through several rewrites. Not only did they have to start shooting without a finished script, but there was prominent studio interference, born out of the pressure to live up to the previous two films. Given the finished product, there is some noticeable irony in that aspiration. Why do so many number 3 movies seem to have this taboo? Occasionally we get an exception, but Alien³ is sadly not one of them. Picking up after Aliens, we find the 4 survivors, Ripley, Newt, Hicks, and Bishop, in stasis. After a fire starts on the ship, an escape pod is launched and subsequently crashes on a refinery/prison planet. Unfortunately, Ripley is the only survivor of the crash, of course, and she must now learn to survive in the deadly prison, which is exclusively for males with a history of violence. In addition, it turns out that one of the aliens was aboard the ship and is now running loose in the prison. Ripley must summon all her remaining strength to put an end to the xenomorph menace once and for all, now more isolated than ever. First of all, the story itself feels like a feature-length insult to those who invested in the other films and the characters. Killing Hicks, Bishop, and Newt off-screen after we saw them live at the end of the second movie is just disrespectful to both the filmmakers and the fan base. We finally had an action movie where Michael Biehn did not die, and you destroyed it. And don't give me the story that he survives in the video game made years later. That is also insulting, and I'm going strictly by the movies here. There were many people who were left thoroughly unsatisfied with this movie, including several who had previous involvement in the franchise. Aliens director James Cameron called the depressing opening a quote-unquote slap in the face, with Michael Biehn being pretty much in agreement. Perhaps the most outspoken critic was the director. This marks the feature film debut of David Fincher, and I was shocked to discover that. This is a fairly competent director who has since made many successful films such as Seven, The Social Network, and the remake of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Despite the constant stress and studio interference, which ultimately caused Fincher to disown the film, Alien³ still shows signs of his distinctively eerie direction. If anything, this can be seen as a demonstration of his talent, even in a losing battle. In the end, however, a troubled production does not make the final product any more or less enjoyable. Sigourney Weaver is still terrific, playing a more emotionally distraught Ripley in this one. The script doesn't give her as much dramatic material to work with, but she carries the movie well nevertheless. The other characters, while not awful, are nothing too special. The most interesting is Clemens, a doctor played by Charles Dance, who thankfully went on to better projects like Game of Thrones. Not only does he nail the cynically professional side to the character, but he also does well in giving us a few heartfelt moments that belong in a much better movie. Charles S. Dutton is fairly entertaining, playing religious leader/fighter Dylan. He sometimes goes a little over the top, but he's still relatively likable and makes her a convincing authority figure later in the film. The other characters are merely okay. Brian Glover is somewhat cartoonish in his snootiness, but he's thankfully not in the movie long enough to break immersion. Ralph Brown is amusingly sarcastic, but he never really gets to go much deeper than that. Pete Postlethwaite is way too great of an actor for his minor role, and the other prisoners are a bunch of cartoon cutout, sardonic British guys. They all basically blend into one. The acting is not the problem. Rather, it is the film's sense of focus that is the issue here. Plot-wise, the story is just a mess. I concede that it would have been very difficult to make a worthy follow-up that would expand on what we had seen in the way that Aliens expanded on the original. However, it's hard to feel a sense of escalation when we only have one alien running around. It's basically the same scenario as the first movie, with more meandering. There are several good ideas here, though. Having Ripley impregnated with a xenomorph, and a queen no less, was a great way of bringing the character to the type of emotional breaking point that we haven't seen before. She is now the biological vessel to this parasitic creature that she has spent 2 movies fighting. The most interesting scenes here are those that focus on this and what she should do when the company shows up to get it. Could she really go home and have a life after all she's been through? Similarly, the idea of a religious movement was not a bad idea either. Given how the xenomorphs have been called the perfect life form, time could have been spent on how the character's perception of God might change when faced with this. Instead of focusing on any one idea, the film frequently switches between several concepts without any rhyme or reason. It feels like a mess, which is where the behind-the-scenes problems start to become noticeable. To be fair, the sets are still well built, despite not being nearly as pleasing to the eye. The creature effects, however, are awkwardly bad. The puppet that they use for the alien makes it look shockingly cheesy, which results in reduced scares. Overall, Alien³ is a disappointing and frustrating entry in the series. The characters are not as strong, the premise is insulting, the effects are comically bad at points, and the whole film just has a depressing atmosphere that makes it somewhat unpleasant to watch. The acting is fairly good, the film is accomplished from a technical standpoint, and there are some inspired ideas here. However, these elements don't really come together to form a consistently good movie like the previous two.